Heated. Back to politics. The president unveils his 2014 budget next week. The president is said to be planning cuts in Social Security and other entitlements. In his weekly address this week, the president said that his proposal wasn't perfect.
While it's not my ideal plan to further reduce the deficit, it's a compromise I'm willing to accept in order to move beyond a cycle of short-term, crisis-driven decision-making.
But Friday morning, attention turned from the budget to jobs. The nation added 88,000 jobs in March. That's compared with 268,000 in February. It was the smallest gain in 9 months. Jared Bernstein is a former economic advisor to Vice President Joe Biden, also an MSNBC contributor. Catherine Rampell is the New York Times economic editor, and Noelle Clemente is with the American Action Forum. Good to see all of you.
Good to be here.
Thank
you.
See you. You know what? Let me start with you, Catherine, since I have you here, and I've got a copy of the Times this morning. I read your article, enjoyed it. You say the closely watched jobs report was discouraging. You called it the spring swoon. Why were the numbers so low? Was it the payroll tax? Was it the sequester? Was it a combination of these things? What was it?
It doesn't seem like the sequester has yet had much of an effect, just if you look at the changes in government payrolls. We don't really know. You know, the hope is that it's just a blip, that the numbers are going to get revised away, but it's very possible that this will be yet another spring in which some momentum that we had seen at the beginning of the year seems to dissipate.
What's with the spring?
I don't know, to be honest, and a lot of economists I spoke with were befuddled as well. The last couple of years, it seemed to be driven by international events. So we had, you know, flare-ups in Europe, Arab Spring, the Japanese tsunami a couple of years ago, and that seemed to maybe disrupt things in the United States as well. This year, we don't have those kind of events to blame it on. So again, you know, the hope is kind of, well, if it's not the payroll tax, which it might be, but we haven't seen that so much in other data, that maybe it's a blip, basically.
Jared, let's look at another number here. The unemployment rate essentially unchanged. It dropped from 7.7% to 7.6%, but economists did not find that encouraging either. Why not?
No, it wasn't encouraging because there are two ways the unemployment rate can come down. One is because more people get jobs, and the other is because more people stop looking. This was the latter. The labor force actually shrunk a bunch in March, and so you can lower the unemployment rate that way, but that's not optimal. And in fact, the share of the population participating in the labor force is very low. It's at a 3-decade low. I want to comment on one thing Catherine said. I think to me it's somewhat less of a mystery as to why the job market is performing pretty subpar. The economy just hasn't been growing fast enough for a long time. I mean, at best, we've kind of hit trend growth, and that's enough to kind of keep things percolating along. But we've never had the sort of bounce out of the deep trough of the recession that we had in earlier periods. And as long as GDP is kind of plodding along like it's been, we really shouldn't expect faster growth. And then when you add the fiscal traps on top of that, it kind of helps figure out why we're stuck where we are.
Catherine, you know, we start talking about growth, and we start talking about structural things. Noelle, excuse me, I wanted to come to you. What do we know about the things that are keeping this economy from growing?
You know, there's a lot of lack of confidence among people who are dropping out of the labor force, like was mentioned, and also among businesses who aren't hiring. We saw this past week that small businesses think that the health care law is the biggest concern coming up, and as the implementation speeds up, I'm concerned that growth is going to continue to be pretty slow for the rest of the year and in the coming years.
Let's pivot to the budget now. President Obama is supposed to be putting out his budget on Wednesday, Catherine. And at this point, what we know about the budget is that he is going to look at cutting entitlements and this would be a first for a Democratic president. What else do we know about the president's budget proposal?
Well, he's also talked about some things that he had mentioned in the State of the Union speech as being his priorities, like extending the availability of preschool universally, and that's something that's in there. Yeah. He talked about, in the State of the Union, and as we can expect this week, further tax increases, potentially to offset some of the costs of the spending expansions that he wants, and those would be both tax increases on the wealthy. There are also rumors that he'll be looking at tax increases on things like tobacco and alcohol as well.
Jared, let's look at the budget proposal. President Obama, again, could be the first Democratic president to do this, to cut Social Security and Medicare benefits. The Washington Post, this is what they say about the president's proposal. He embraces a risky strategy of courting Republicans for a grand bargain on the debt while angering Democratic allies with cuts to the nation's entitlement programs. Is the president more likely to alienate his allies or his opponents with this budget, Jared Bernstein?
Well, theoretically, it should be his allies because a lot of folks to his left view cutting entitlements as crossing a Rubicon that, as you suggested, a Democratic president, they don't expect him to cross. What's been very curious is really when you think about what a grand bargain is, it's Democrats agreeing to entitlement cuts and Republicans agreeing to tax increases. Well, this morning's news has Republicans saying, okay, we'll take the entitlement cuts, but you can't have the tax increases. So that suggests that A, they're not really playing fair, and B, this probably isn't going anywhere.
No, I love your honesty, Jared Bernstein. Noelle, Mr. Obama, he is going to resume his charm offensive this week. He is going to be dining with Senate Republicans Wednesday evening. He is expected to formally introduce his budget that same day. How effective do we think this round of the charm offensive might be?
I think that from what we've seen so far from this budget proposal, if this is the new definition of a grand bargain, then we're redefining what grand means. We got tax increases at the beginning of the year, and I think it's great that we're all talking on the same page about the fact that reducing the debt is the most important thing to do, but now we have to get from some kind of a similar starting line, and I hope that having these conversations is positive and effective, but I think that what we've seen so far from this new proposal is a change in rhetoric, but not really a change in policy.
Craig, can I jump in? Let me make a point. I don't think that just tying together the two things, what we talked about today, I don't think most Americans would agree that lowering the debt is the most important thing we have to do right now. I would think they would think lowering the unemployment rate and increasing the rate of job growth right now. Over the longer term, sure, we have to get the budget on a sustainable path. But too much focus on short-term deficit reduction really delivers you to the kind of austerity that set Europe back into recession.
Catherine, there has been a lot made of the president's budget plan and how different it really is from some of his past statements on what he would like to see in the budget. How different is it?
I think there's a lot. Well, we haven't actually seen the budget plan, so I should
that's
say
why
that.
I carefully said not a previous budget. But
so we don't actually know. But it sounds like a lot of what's been talked about are things that he's floated in the past. So they are, these ideas like finding a way to curb the cost of Social Security and for Medicare. These are things that he's talked about. These are things that he's talked about openly. He talked about them with Boehner and with other Republicans and, in a public forum as well. So I'm not sure that there'll be any big surprises, at least based on what we know, or big deviations from what he's talked about in the past.
Jared Bernstein, Catherine Rampell, Noelle Clemente, thanks to all of you. Do appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, a sneak peek at a new book which shows a side of 43 we've almost never seen.